Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. I have the pleasure to invite you all in this 8th Equitable Education Alliance meeting. This is a great opportunity for us to be together, and I'm sure we will really learn with each other. Thank you, UNESCO colleagues, for I am the facilitating for this morning host, which will be supported by other UNESCO colleagues. So basically in the first half, we have Dr. Lars, who will be delivering a welcome speech, followed by a 3 speaker. We have Dennis, we have Maud, and of course we have Karthik. So I will be introducing all these speakers when it's their time during that. So before I proceed further, may I have the pleasure to talk a little bit on about what is these alliances. Basically, these alliances, Equitable Education Alliances, was established in 2020. It's much more a learning platform and also a sharing of knowledge. And I'm sure from this learning, we will be sharing with each other. And this is a great opportunity for all of us to really see and learn with each other. These meetings are held annually 2 times a day, and this is the 8th meeting, and we are focusing on mostly monitoring, evaluation towards sustaining equitable education. So I guess everybody have received those concept notes. So thank you once again, and I hope we enjoy. And before I proceed further, I would like to once again thank you. And I would like to call upon Dr. Lars, if I may, to deliver a welcome speech. And just before that, I would just like to give you a little bit of his biodata. Dr. Lars, he's an economics, he's a World Bank and based in Bangkok currently. And he has written so many books on education. And he's also part of this reimagining education in developing East Asia Pacific region. And he do have many books. So over to you, Dr. Lars, for the welcome speech. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the kind introduction, and thank you for inviting me to today's learning event, which I have very much looked forward for. Welcome to everyone also on my behalf to this 8th session. So for today's session, we are lucky to have 3 fantastic speakers lined up for you. 2 of them have come prepared to share some really great examples of how they have made monitoring and evaluation an integral part of their interventions. And thanks to this very strong focus on monitoring and evaluation, they're able to present to us some very compelling evidence that their interventions and programs they delivered tangible positive benefits to their beneficiaries. And we're also lucky today to have a speaker who will present a tool, the Education Scalability Checklist, which governments and their partners can use to help scale up interventions that have been proven to work. To get us started, allow me to highlight the 5 reasons why I think monitoring and evaluation is so critically important to everything we do. First of all, monitoring and evaluation, or M&E, helps ensure that the programs that we implement or the projects, they are held accountable for their actions and results. And this allows stakeholders, including those that are funding them, or governments and beneficiaries, to assess whether the intended goals and objectives are being met. Second, M&E helps determine the effectiveness of the interventions. So by continuously tracking progress and outcomes, we can identify what works, but equally importantly, what doesn't work. And third, and indeed, this this focus on what works and what doesn't work, with that focus, M&E helps promote a culture of learning and adaptation. And when organizations, they collect data on their projects and programs, again, they can learn both from their successes, which we all like to talk about, but also about our failures. And both are equally important to allow us to design better programs in the future. Fourth, through M&E, organizations can identify bottlenecks or inefficiencies, areas where resources are not put well to use. And this in turn allows for better resource allocation and potentially allowing us to introduce programs and interventions that come at less cost and have even more impact. And finally, excuse me, a very strong focus on M&E in the design ensures that it's data and evidence which informs our decision-making processes rather than assumptions or personal opinions. So given this importance of M&E, I was thrilled when I was invited to be part of this conversation today, and I can't wait to learn from our speakers, and I hope you will enjoy the learning of today's session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lars. That was really great. Your highlight, I guess, I'm sure many of us will be learning a lot. And it's true that now, without M&E, we cannot even imagine, I think, not only in education, but each and every program. So basically, it was a great, thank you, and for delivering the great, your thoughts on that. And of course, I do agree that the bottlenecks which are there, and we cannot have our assumption, that's very true. So thank you once again for the very good speech on that. So now, can I switch over to our speaker? So before I call on to Denni, Puspa, Purbasari, yeah, so she will be the first speaker. I would like to just give a few highlights on her biodata. So basically, she was the executive director in project management office in Kartu Prakerja program. Sorry if I pronounce, it's difficult for us, in the Ministry of Economy Affairs since 2020 in Korea, and also a lecturer in Department of Economics. Besides that, a former Economy Deputy Chief of Staff and President in Republic of, sorry, not Korea, but Indonesia from 2015 to 20. And then she has also received an award and Fulbright scholarship for her thesis, an award, and from the University of Colorado Fellowship. Thank you once again, and over to you, Dennis. Once again, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Purnima, for the kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, and all the audience in this discussion. So I would like to present Indonesia large-scale skill development program called Prakerja. And I would like to share how Prakerja actually can give access and bring effectiveness to the program with size of 5 million people per year. So next slide. So Prakerja was initiated by Mr. President Joko Widodo himself during the presidential campaign back in February 2019. And then after the election was over in May, I was assigned by the executive office of the president to design the program. Because Mr. President wants this program can basically provide access at least 2 million people per year, then I helped hundreds of FGDs involving all the stakeholders in order to understand the problem, what data available, and what kind of mechanism design needed for the program. Eventually, in February 2020, the regulations all are set. And then when Prakerja was about being started, COVID-19 hit Indonesia. And then Mr. President asked Prakerja, with the capacity of digital technology, to play double roles. Besides giving access of learning, it also has to provide temporary social assistance. And therefore, Prakerja transformed to be a semi-social assistant in nature. The first batch of Prakerja started in April 2020 with the quota of enrollment 200,000 people for the first batch. And then after the implementation, we engage with the National Committee of Poverty Alleviation in order to do rapid assessment of the program. Next slide. So this is about Prakerja. Prakerja built an ecosystem consisting all the stakeholders that we need to bring maximum value to millions of Indonesians labor force. So Prakerja is open for all Indonesians aged 18 years old to 64 years old. Prakerja wants to give opportunity, second opportunity for everyone to learn and to upgrade their skills, because the problem of Indonesia is lack of productivity. The amount of or the number of labor force in Indonesia was back in 2020 was about 145 million people. 90% of them never attended any vocational trainings. So that's why Mr. President wants at least 2 million people served. How to do in such scale? So Prakerja built an ecosystem consisting all the training providers in Indonesia, but they have to basically meet the criteria of quality. And then when they submit their proposals to join into the ecosystem, they are assessed by the industry and also universities and educational institutions in Indonesia. And then once they are in Prakerja ecosystem, they are actually listed in the marketplace. And everybody actually can select these trainings. Prakerja, using machine learning, try to match the demographic profiles of the participant with the appropriate trainings. However, with the search engine that is available in the personal dashboard, people actually can basically find the right courses from hundreds of courses available in the ecosystem. And then Prakerja also has integration with job portals, the largest ones in Indonesia, such that if I finish Excel or Adobe Photoshop, for example, design graphic courses, then I will receive in my personal dashboard all the job opportunities that require those skills. And then I can basically register and apply and attach the certificates of Prakerja to that job. So Prakerja, during the pandemic, gave a large sum of social assistance, but essentially it is like a conditional cash transfer. Participants must finish the trainings, and after that, they are given cash transfer. They can choose banks or fintech accounts, and it happens seamlessly. So that's basically about Prakerja. Next slide. So how to monitor the whole thing? So Prakerja provides again and try to solve the problem of mismatch in labor market and also in the training market, and then make a digital platform as the connector, as the bridge for the workers in order to basically find the right courses and find quickly the right jobs for them. So Prakerja has many indicators to be monitored. Like Dr. Lars mentioned, we are given budget as much as 1.3 billion US dollar per year. And during the pandemic, the target was enlarged to 5 million people per year. How? We cannot fail because this is a big amount of money. That's why since day one, we engage with some experts, independent research institutes, in order to evaluate us from rapid assessment to impact evaluation. And we also have data that can capture the daily pulse of the process that is basically run through by each participant of Prakerja. So we use Metabase to have daily pulse. We have also daily monitoring and real-time dashboard monitoring from all the contact center channels that we have. We have a WhatsApp or a live chat. We also have hotline, 7 days, 24 hours per day. And we also have a form of complaints because everybody is unique. How they are comfortable in basically complaining things or asking things, we need to provide different channels. And then we also engage with some research institutes and also NGOs to check the compliance and the implementation of the training and on the training sites. So during the pandemic, all the trainings are undertaken via online. But this year, we have offline trainings as well. That's why Prakerja with only 150 personnel cannot do in Indonesia with 13,000 islands. That's why we built collaboration with many local universities and NGOs in order to share the burden and build ownership together. And then we also, this is basically the priority of occupation that provided in the ecosystem of Prakerja. We also have here the indicators is basically trainings on the training providers, on the digital platform, on the payment partners, and also on the participants. All are monitored. And then next slide. So how to do the impact evaluation? Because ultimately, we want to know the opinion and the results of the training. And then here, the evaluation survey of beneficiaries are undertaken 3 times. The first survey was given after the whole user journey is done. And it is given 30 days after the ending point of each participant step. And then the second evaluation survey is under 90 days after, and then after that, 120 days after. So the key here is that we give some phase in order to make sure that people actually can be observed the impact of the training for their job or their business, or how they actually can improve their skills, their income, and so on. And then the section of the evaluation survey, so we give online survey, and the number of questions is more than 80 questions, including the demographic, employment, their employment status in January or before they are actually entering the program, the current employment, and then the entrepreneurship, and then whether they are a migrant worker, section for the migrant workers, and then what kind of trainings, the impact of the trainings for them, and then the reaction evaluation, and also their well-being and their financial situation. And then our survey, because it is given for all the participants, and until now, Prakerja has the number of participants of 17 million people, and it is not repeated. So if I was the participant in 2020, I cannot be the participant in 2021, 2022, and so on, because the money is limited. That's why we try to spread over to the entire labor force in Indonesia. And then what happened here is that the number of survey was answered by 14.5 million people. So this is a very rich data that we can basically study and study deeper. And then next slide. So this is about our engagement with the external evaluators. So again, we engage with more than 11 research institutes, domestic and foreign, to evaluate Prakerja. So we are, it's like the most open program to be evaluated. Why? Because we play or we bet with 1.3 billion rupiah. There is no room for error. I'd rather to get the bad news and then correct it quickly rather than allow and pretending that everything is okay. So that's why we have rapid assessment with TNP2K, the National Committee for the Poverty Evaluation. And then we are also evaluated by the World Bank. And also World Bank also have the study on the G2P payment. We also evaluated by CAMaL using RCT method, the most advanced methodology in impact evaluation, and also for Presisi Indonesia and other national surveys. So these surveys are not funded by Prakerja. They are funded by the independent parties, because we want to make sure the integrity and also there is no conflict of interest. And then last one, this is about some of the main points or main findings of the impact evaluation. So Prakerja, with that scale, we can double the number of people who ever attended any training in Indonesia. Previously, we stuck at the number of 9% or 10%, but in 3 years, we can double this size. And then the result of impact evaluation, for example, from CAMaL, then they found 18% actually the impact of this program to the participant in terms of starting a new job. And then CAMaL also found that the participant increased their monthly income by 10% compared to the non-beneficiary. The amount is actually equivalent to 61% of food assistance cards program in Indonesia. And it is also equivalent to 4.2% of the average labor wage in Indonesia. And not only that, by using the deduction of CAMaL results, we found, engaging with Prospera, another consultant, we found that the return on investment of Prakerja is 15.5%. Not only that, Presisi Indonesia using RCT, they found that Prakerja actually enhanced entrepreneur skills of the participant by 49% and increased the monthly income by 17 to 21% compared to the non-beneficiaries. And the last evaluation done this year, actually done by CIPG, funded by ADB, they found that Prakerja contribute positively 8 to 17 of the SDGs. For example, 88% of Prakerja participants actually can access the quality training that supports their lifelong learning, and so on. So I stop here, and we will have a discussion right after all the presenters present their points. Thank you.
Thank you, Denni. That was really great. I have learned a lot, and I think South Asia, as we know that the more and more unskilled labor force are coming up, so I'm sure many have learned a lot. In fact, for Nepal, we are also starting, in fact, such kind of a program. So that was a great learning. So I may come back to you again personally to learn more. If there are any questions, please keep in the chat box. And there will be a session after the presenter. So I'm sure your curiosity will be taken care of. So not really going much. So may I call upon Maud. Before that, I would like to introduce her. Maud, she is a Global Strategic Education Advisor at VVOB, specialized in global education, and basically her focus is on the development of teachers. As we know that teachers are the most important part of education. And of course, she has been leading as a co-creation of Education Scalability Checklist, which I guess we'll be hearing in a short while. And she's also advisory board member of Global Schools. Besides that, she's also coordinating and supporting skilling for sustainable future flagship for youth in secondary education and scaling education solution through government system in 4 education subsector. So she has 20 years of experience and international development, and she holds a master's degree in comparative and international education from Teacher College of Columbia University and master's degree in upper secondary teacher certification from University of Ghent, which is in Belgium. So with this introduction, I would like to hand over to Maud. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. to introduce the Education Scalability Checklist, indeed a tool to support governments, funders, and education organizations to scale up effective education initiatives. I will start sharing my slides now.
You have started screen share. Participants can now see your application. You are screen sharing.
So I will start with a bit of background, first on the organization that I work for, which is VVOB. VVOB is a member of the Equitable Education Alliance. We are an international non-profit with our head office based in Belgium, where I am also working, and offices in 8 other countries, including Cambodia and Vietnam, as well as Kenya, Rwanda, South Africa, Uganda, and Zambia on the African continent, and Ecuador in Latin America. We are a strategic and implementing partner to ministries of education, and several of our country teams have staff embedded in ministries. Our focus is on strengthening the systems for the professional development of teachers and school leaders for early childhood education, primary education, general secondary, and secondary technical and vocational education and training. We developed the Education Scalability Checklist together with 5 other organizations: the Center for Universal Education at Brookings, Educate, Stir Education, Pratham, who is also represented on this panel, and Management Systems International. The checklist is in fact an adaptation of an existing sector-agnostic scalability assessment tool that was originally developed by MSI. The Education Scalability Checklist, or ESC, as I will call it from now on, is available online in 3 languages, together with a user guide and an explainer video. And I'm sure the link will be provided in the chat. It was created in 2021. And then, since then, VVOB has used it across all our interventions. It is also mostly for planning and implementation, and some of our teams have also embedded it or integrated it in their monitoring and evaluation systems. It is also being used by the non-profit global school leaders and their partners in Malaysia, Indonesia, India, the Philippines, Uganda, Kenya, and Nigeria. And in collaboration with Brookings, we have introduced it to the GPE KICS education innovators in Latin America. Together with our team in Vietnam, we are creating an update, and that is informed by user feedback, and we should be able to make that available next year. In creating the ESC, we had a couple of principles in mind, and we believe those should also guide its use. So above all, because we are working in the education sector, so we are working for the public good, the goal is really to expand impact or to scale impact, a breadth of learning outcomes for life and work, or indeed impact beyond that, as we just learned from the previous speaker, so impact in terms of earnings or employment.
Sorry, we cannot hear. Sorry.
Really unmute.
Am I here? Am I audible? Okay.
Yes.
Was I audible before?
A bit of 2 or 3 minutes, 1 or 2 minutes we could hear. So maybe you can, if you can repeat that slide, that would be great.
Okay. So this one, okay. So maybe to give you some of the principles that were important when we were developing the Education Scalability Checklist. So first of all, because we are working in education and working for the public good, the goal is really to expand or scale impact. So a breadth of learning outcomes for life and work, and in an equitable manner, and to sustain those at an optimal scale. So the education innovation or initiative model, or whatever term is being used in your context, we use those interchangeably. It's just a means to that end. It is not an end in itself. in public policy, it's the outcomes of the innovation that should be scaled. Expanding or deepening an innovation is really a way to get there. And very often what we see is that the focus is on scaling an innovation itself, replicating or growing it so that it reaches more users. But here what we are talking about and what is really important is really the notion of scaling for impact and placing the emphasis squarely on the outcomes of the innovation. Keep in mind that the scalability checklist itself was not designed to help you assess whether you are achieving that impact. So in that sense, it's not really a guide to deciding whether it's desirable to scale a certain innovation. It is really meant to be used in tandem with other monitoring and evaluation tools and impact evaluations so that you can use it to ease scaling, but not necessarily to decide on whether or not you should be scaling a certain innovation. A second principle that is shared by the organizations that develop the ESC is that when it comes to delivering public goods sustainably and at scale, government institutions are absolutely essential. So even when governments are in some contexts faced with constraints, the education systems, public education systems are really unrivaled when it comes to the delivery network that is needed to deliver quality education in perpetuity to large. Scaling usually means promoting the adoption of an innovative practice by government agencies and ultimately by teachers and school leaders in schools that are run by the government, subsidized or accredited by government governments.
Excuse me,
So,
Maud, can you hear us?
Yes.
You are having the speakers on and your computer is reading out loud the chat. So if you could turn off your speakers or turn off the function of reading out loud the chat,
Is this
because
okay?
now we can hear same time.
Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you correctly. But same time we can hear the AI system or the Zoom reading out loud the chat comments.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please continue.
Yeah, please continue.
I'm going to continue speaking because I don't get a feedback at this moment. So the scaling methodology that is really implemented in or embedded in the Education Scalability Checklist is a method that is called replication, in the sense that the innovation is assumed to originate outside of the government education system. For example, it's being the innovation stems from an NGO or a social enterprise or a university. And this originating organization wants to transfer that innovation into a government-run education system, which is then called the adopting organization. And this terminology is what you can see in the embedded in the tool. That kind of a replication scenario typically involves scaling up, so impacting laws and policies, regulatory frameworks, as well as scaling deep, so deeply embedding an innovation within institutions, changing relationships, changing the hearts and minds of the everyday users, and changing everyday ways of doing. In VVOB's experience and that of the other organizations that were involved in creating the tool, scaling is a long-term process, and it is not unusual to see that it takes a decade or more for reaching impact at a national scale when the originating organization is outside of the government. Clearly, from the example from Indonesia, things move much more quickly when the government partner is in the driver's seat from the beginning. So the image that you can see here is taken from a resource called Scaling Up from Vision to Large Scale Change that was developed by MSI, and I believe the link to that will also be put in the chat. So in reality, the scaling trajectory is not quite as linear as this image might suggest, but nevertheless, it's helpful to remind us of two important things. First of all, it's important for innovators to think of scaling from the outset, just as you need to start having a good monitoring and an evaluation system from the outset to start measuring impact early on. It is important to think of potentially scaling your innovation early on. Secondly, it also highlights, so the image also highlights the two things that the scalability checklist can really help you with, which is on the one hand, assessing the ease or difficulty of scaling an education innovation, and also for developing a plan to scale the initiative for impact. So a few rules of thumb when before we dig into the tool. So it is a diagnostic and a planning tool. It is best used to trigger a dialogue on scaling and to feed the development of a scaling plan. It is not particularly helpful when it's used as a scorecard or a one-off exercise. So it's really something to embed in your systems. It's best to start using it early. We would recommend using it at least once a year throughout scaling processes at regular pause and reflect moments to see how does the innovation, how is it evolving, how does it need to be adjusted, and to expand the group of users step by step as part of that process. So what we have often seen is that the tool is first being used internally by organizations that develop innovations, and then gradually they involve more and more partners in the discussion. Of course, it is never too late to start thinking through your scaling plan. What is also usually needed is some training. So within the organization that has developed the innovation, we would recommend to have at least one facilitator. At least one person, that same person needs to be aware of the basics of scaling processes. Some materials are already available, but of course the best way to start using this is to learn by doing it. And then what we have also found is before actually thinking through a scaling, your first scaling plans together with your partners, it is quite important to create a vision for what is it actually that is being scaled. The innovation itself needs to be preferably quite well structured and quite well documented first, so everybody around the table can talk about, has the same innovation in mind, and that in and of itself is often already a very helpful exercise. Then where and for whom does scaling really need to occur? So to give you an example of a teaching at the right level intervention that was originated in India with our colleagues from Pratham, and that in the meantime has been transferred to several countries in Africa with VVOB as an implementing partner. There, some of the discussions are also for which target learners exactly does this methodology need to apply? Does it need to apply to only to learners in grades 3 to 5 for primary education? Can it be expanded to lower grades or higher grades? To which districts does it need to expand? So having a discussion on that is, and a data-informed discussion on that is quite important. How will scaling be accomplished and who performs key functions? Notably, who performs key functions around monitoring and in evaluating innovations. Very often we see that this is done by implementing partners of governments at the start. But in fact, it is quite important, as we also learned from the previous presentation, that this monitoring and evaluation is truly embedded and becomes embedded within that government system. So when we will take a quick look at the tool so that you can see its more practically, but basically the structure consists of a number of, it's an Excel-based tool. It exists of a number of sheets that are a diagnostic and planning. And the diagnostic part of it is organized around 7 dimensions that are critical to keep in mind when scaling an innovation. So having a convincing scaling strategy, making sure the initiative is credible, making sure that it has strong support, that it has a relative advantage over other possible solutions or over the status quo, making sure that it is easy to transfer it from the originating organization into that adopting government system, making sure there is a good fit between the initiative and the government institutions, and of course, making sure that there are sustainable sources of funding. I will give you a quick glance of the tool. So you can see it, an example of a teaching at the right level intervention in one of our partner countries. The tool goes over all the dimensions, the 7 dimensions of scaling, and has a number of statements or indicators, if you like, that signify whether scaling will be easier or whether scaling the intervention will be more difficult. So if we go, for example, to a category that would need to be looked at early on, how easy will it be for the initiative to transfer, in this case, from originally from India, but then to the African context and to a specific country that is here being documented? How easy will it be to make that transfer? So, for example, is that intervention, is it a small departure from what is currently happening and what key staff in the education system are doing? Or in fact, is it quite a large departure from current practices of educators and key staff in the education system? So here we are on the item that I have looked. And for example, at the time that this particular assessment was being done by one of our teams, the assessment was that at a classroom level, the departure is mainly from a lecture style of lessons with teachers at the chalkboard. So that is a change that needs to be made. That the school level, at the school level, the new practices have to do with a mentoring approach by school leaders, data-driven decision-making, on which teachers to support actually in applying the teaching at the right level methodology. And at the district level there, the major change identified was also around data-driven decision-making. The intervention did from the start conform to government policies and regulations, and also to its advantage is that the classroom methodology was easy to understand, simple to follow, and very focused in terms of the desired learning outcomes, which in this case is foundational literacy and numeracy. So the purpose of this assessment is truly to gather as many different perspectives on the intervention as possible to get kind of a 360-degree analysis of how easy or difficult it will be to scale, and then to develop a scaling plan based and using these insights. So more than the actual scoring, I would say, or the numeric scoring of an intervention, we believe that these insights and the qualitative part of it are the more important ones for to drive the scaling forward. Normally, you can see my slides again. So some of the emerging lessons that we are seeing now that the tool has been used for a good 18 months, in terms of the different dimensions of scaling, the ones that are best addressed first is the one that I showed you. So making sure that the intervention is easy to transfer into an existing system, making it as simple as possible and really removing all the extras, at least at the start. Then making sure that it's quite well structured, it is documented and standardized, because if it is not, it will be more difficult for other stakeholders to understand and to implement. Test it on a small scale, align it with the existing curriculum and professional standards, and to focus on monitoring a few priority indicators. So to resist the tendency to monitor everything, but to focus on a few indicators that are absolutely key and that can then also be taken up in the monitoring systems of the government education system, so in the EMIS systems. Start early on building the credibility and the support base for your initiative. So at very early on, good enough and right on time evidence can work. Very often when you start building a support base and you may not be ready yet to run RCTs or to collect rigorous evidence on the impact, early on it can be important to bring government partners to implementing schools and actually seeing an intervention in action. That can be quite powerful, but of course your evidence base needs to expand and become more rigorous over time, especially also to convince funding partners of its credibility. And then also very early on, foster champions for your innovation and identify carefully where the resistance to a change may come from. So for example, one of the areas of resistance identified in the case of the teaching at the right level intervention that we just saw had to do with a number of hours of extra teaching hours needed from teachers for which there were no incentives. So when that is then identified, then that becomes part of the areas to address in your scalability plan. Then we tend to turn to the fit with the education system and to securing sustainable funding. So building strong relationships with key stakeholders at all levels of the education system, with major attention to be paid to the middle tier or district level or zone level, depending on the country, education officers who have often a very important role to play in the monitoring and the quality and the fidelity of implementation, shifting leadership from an implementing organization to the government partner and building capacity around that. Very important on the monitoring and evaluation part, building the monitoring and evaluation into government dashboards, for example, and really moving
so maybe please
together with
the time, please.
Then
please
in terms of sustainable funding, identifying existing government budget lines to tap into, further simplifying the solution to reduce cost and carrying out cost analysis and ideally indeed cost benefit analysis is part of that strategy. I will pause here and then I will await questions after the third speaker.
Thank you, Maud. Because of the time, we need to
press CMD plus to open pop-up.
Thank you once again. I think that was great, but I'm sure that if we want more in detail, I'm sure we can be in touch. And as requested, I'm sure there will be a lot of questions from other participants. So may I request in the chat box to have your questions, which we'll be dealing it separately in the QA session. And then without much delay, so can I go over to the third speaker, Mr. Karthik Menon. So I have the pleasure to invite Karthik Menon. He is a co-lead in MME, Measurement, Monitoring and Evaluation Team Lead, Operation Elementary Government Partnership, organization of Pratham Education Foundation, which is a very famous in India. We have also heard a lot about that, and doing a great job. And he is also a postgraduate applied economics and undergraduate in mathematics, and he has been Pratham for 7 years. He's currently leading Operation Government Partnership Program and also a co-lead for Pratham Measurement, Monitoring and Evaluation. He manages and oversees the execution of M&E framework with a focus of government partnership via 75 member team across 20 states of India. So without much delay, I would like to say he's a senior consultant and education sector focused research consulting and professional service firm. During his 3 to 5 years, he has led many projects and delivered many results. So over to you, Karthik.
Thank you, Purnima. Thank you, everyone. Wonderful presentations we've heard already and a wide variety of interventions running in different parts of the world. Today, I will showcase actually a very small, or the duration of the intervention was significantly short. And I do want to link it with the previous two speakers, where in the first presentation, we saw a year-round large-scale program across the entire nation. Maud spoke more about the scalability checklist, which is quite a useful tool, which can be applied to a lot of interventions being run by partners like us. And today, I actually want to showcase a short burst intervention that Pratham ran this summer to improve basic literacy in certain states of India, based, in fact, on teaching at the right level than Maud was actually talking about, but done through volunteers. And I do want to talk about some of the M&E practices that we try to inbuilt into the program itself, so that we had evidence coming out of the program and we could learn as we go. The intervention itself was quite short, but we did include a lot of M&E practices within the system to actually see how it was actually going on and what the impact of it was. So there'll be 4 topics that I'll speak about today. Firstly, how did we really see impact? How did we see what improvement actually happened in basic language skills of children by running such an intervention? How did we monitor all of this and validate some of the results? What were some of the technology tools that we used in a low resource setting, very basic tech tools, so that we could collect this evidence? And broadly, what are some of the learnings around M&E that we could garner? Firstly, what was this all about and why did we run such an intervention? It was just done very recently. It's very fresh in my mind as well. So the larger problem, especially in a lot of developing nations, including India, is post-COVID. We had an entire school year, uninterrupted school year, but there was still significant learning loss. This was a case even prior to COVID, and during COVID, because of school closure, this actually became even worse. There's an annual survey called the ASER survey that is done to, it's an education dipstick to understand what the learning, basic literacy, numeracy levels of children are in India, representative at a national or at a state level. This also highlighted that 43% of children in grade 5 are still unable, can read a standard 2-level text, but that still means more than 50% can't. Similarly, 50% children are still struggling with basic arithmetic skills. In the last 2 years as well, in India, there have been a series of policy initiatives. Our new national education policy was launched. A dedicated intervention, mission around foundational literacy and numeracy was also launched, but all of it focused on grades 1, 2, and 3. So the basic question came that, this is the situation for children who are beyond grade 3 as well. There are grade 5 kids, grade 6 kids who are still unable to read. So we thought that we could run a 1-month short burst, large-scale campaign to at least improve the literacy skills of children in 3 targeted states, 3 very large states of India, known as Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, and Madhya Pradesh. They're in central India and they have a very large population. And we wanted to do this because it was summer holidays in India, teachers were not available, but we wanted to see how the community can actually participate and improve learning levels. So we thought, how can we include volunteers in this, in such an intervention? So through various channels with a lot of government support as well, we were able to mobilize and inform volunteers and youth across these 3 states about the need of such an intervention and how they can participate. A lot of existing networks were tapped into. In 2 states, the education department also came on board and helped in a variety of ways by putting up hoardings in different locations, taking out newspaper ads, having radio jingles. And that way, the entire, about the campaign, about the intervention, there was more information out there so that volunteers could come on board. Once the volunteers were identified, again, this is being done at a very large scale, driven by Pratham, but having a lot of partners to support it. We were able to provide training to these volunteers, and we gave them 4 very basic inputs. First, we gave them a very simple manual, which had all the details of the activities that they could do based on teaching at the right level, basic assessment tools that they could use, and data collection formats. We gave them a simple web link where they could register themselves, create a profile for themselves, and actually upload baseline and endline data so that we could actually see what impact is having, and the volunteer could also understand what impact they were having. We gave them digital stories via WhatsApp, which was professionally curated stories that they could play every day with the children that they were working with. And finally, we gave them a short course on first aid, which they could actually view on WhatsApp, so that they could also upskill themselves on certain topics. Who were these volunteers? They were mainly youth between the ages of 16 and 25. They were either in school or had completed grade 11 or grade 12. The gender ratio was actually quite even, 50% male and female. And they had access to a smartphone. We were able to reach about 300,000 volunteers like this. We covered 165 districts, which were all the districts of these states. And the intervention actually touched 3.4 million children, primarily children moving from grade 5 to 6, and sometimes even grade 7. All of this was actually done at a very low cost, low budget. A little more than $300,000 was actually spent by Pratham. But a lot of partners, a lot of government actually came on board to provide resources, volunteers, training venues, and monitoring support. Now, to achieve all of this at such a large scale, how do we really come to impact? How do we really know that all of this made any impact? So firstly, I just want to quickly tell you about what our reading tool was. This was an intervention focused on language so that all children could at least have the basics of literacy in place. The assessment tool has 5 levels. There's a story level, which is the highest level of the tool, which is pegged at a standard 2 level text. 1 level lower is para, which is a standard 1 level text. So I'll tell you the sequence of the assessment. Every child is assessed one-on-one by the instructor. They are asked if they could read this text. This is a simple standard 1 level text in Hindi. If they can read it, we give them a standard 2 level text. If they can read that, we peg them at the highest level. If they are not able to read this and are able to read the paragraph, we mark them at the para level. If they are not able to read the paragraph, then we ask them a set of words, common words, if they can read them. And of course, each level has a certain administrative process. And if they can read these words, then we ask them the para again. If they cannot read the para, then we mark them at the word level. If they're not able to read the word level, we ask them to read letters, following the same process. If they're not able to read letters, they are at a beginner level. So this is a simple way to actually understand what level the child is at so that we can give targeted inputs to them. In this intervention, majority of the children who were targeted were at letter or word or beginner level. And our entire goal was so all of them could actually read this story, which you can see on the right-hand corner. What was the impact of this? All of this data was actually collected by our volunteers, and we could see that within a period of 4 weeks, the intervention only ran for 4 weeks, that a 25 percentage point improvement we could see in the learning ability of children to read a standard 2 level text. There was even a reduction of about 29 percentage points in children who were at letter or could not even recognize letters. So there was a significant impact on the reading ability of all the children who were part of the intervention. Now, to do all of this, of course, there had to be some quality control mechanisms put in place. Very simple. This is a short burst program, but we do want some processes to be there so that all the data that gets generated or reported can be verified. We had assessment verification that would be done within 5 to 7 days of the baseline. Someone from the system who was supporting the program, either from Pratham side or the government side, would go and retest the children to see if what the volunteer has done is correct or not. There was in-person process monitoring. A very simple checklist was given so that we know if the classes were going on, what the attendance was, what basic activities were going on, were they going on as planned or not. And because of the scale of this intervention, we didn't have so many monitors. Remote monitoring mechanisms were also put in place, and at least 4 to 5 volunteers daily were called just to find out from them what their experience was, how the class was running, what the profile or the learning profile of the class was, so that we could also get a general sense of what was going on in the intervention. Just keeping time in mind, I'll broadly what we were able to achieve was 7% of the volunteers of 300,000 volunteers, their assessment was verified. And we found that 80% of what the volunteers had assessed was correct. We were able to meet at least 17% of the volunteers in person. And we did see while the activities were going on that they were on track. 85% attendance was actually reported during these monitoring visits. And all the other major components that were supposed to be done in the intervention were going as planned. Even in the remote monitoring calls, we were able to reach at least 1/4 of all the volunteers. And we were able to gain very specific insights on what the implementation was going on. By doing these 3 processes, we had a general sense, and this is all baked into the program itself. We were able to verify the results that were coming in, and we were able to do process monitoring in different ways. How was all of this done? We had a simple data collection tool where the volunteer would sign up with their phone number, they would enter their own profile, baseline data and endline data that I showed you, as well as do some quizzes that we had shared with them. For a monitor, they would get mapped to every volunteer. So they would have a dashboard on their phone or on their laptop to see all the volunteers who were mapped to them, and they could then do a variety of activities. This is just a simple screenshot of all the information that we collected for a volunteer. P means the profile, BL means the baseline data, EL means the endline data, F is feedback, and Q. All the rectangles was information collected by a volunteer, and all the circles were basically the monitoring that happened. For example, the process monitoring, in-person process monitoring, this is the form that was filled. There was a remote monitoring form that was filled, and then there was a verification form that was filled. In that way, we were able to actually collect quite a bit of data during the course of the intervention by implementers of the program itself. Broadly, the learnings that we had during this intervention was that if you have easy, simple, easy to understand assessment tools, then you can actually measure impact from within the program. ASER tool is a prime example of that. Our implementers can actually be data collectors if they see value in what the data they are collecting. They could see that they did an assessment, they understood the level of the child, and they were able to provide activities and inputs accordingly. Layering in simple digital tasks for youth is a way to actually attract a lot of youth and increase accountability. We saw that almost 300,000 volunteers participated and 93% of them actually uploaded baseline and endline data. Simple mechanisms of verification gives us more confidence in a lot of data that we are reporting outwards. And finally, having simple process monitoring processes, either in person or remotely, ensured that we were able to track a very short intervention being done at a very large scale efficiently throughout the program. I'll stop here. I'm happy to answer any questions that come later on. I think I'll be handing over to Lars after this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Karthik. That was really great. In a short period, a very good result. I'm sure with you will also get a lot of questions. I think we have learned a lot from all those 3 presenters. So now, may I request that now we have a question and answer session. May I request our UNESCO Secretariat to please keep the timing. And now we go over to this question and answer session, which will be in the chat box that will be monitored. So we'll have some time to go through that. So please have your question, and please, it would be good to specify to whom the question is. That will help us to answer specifically. So here we looks like the first question goes to Denni.
All right. One significant improvement for the Prakerja program have been done based on the result of monitoring and evaluation. So if I can count the number of iteration or adjustment that happen in the system and process, I cannot, because it is like almost on a daily basis. We got new information from the data, and then we try to improve. Some of the improvements actually can take like 2 months. Some actually only like 2 weeks. And that's happened like on the daily basis, because again, data keeps coming, and then we try to improve our system and process. Like, for example, how to optimize the utilization of the virtual servers, how to make sure that people who haven't purchased for 7 days after they are enrolled in the program might got some help. And we need to know what exactly their problems. So we send out the emails and also notifications to them, reminder that they can only have 15 days in order to purchase the trainings in the ecosystem. And if they have any problems, we have the option like A, whether you don't know what to do, B, whether you have a trouble in the signal or internet, and then C, whether you don't know what courses need to be taken, and so on. And once we got like 20% of the answers, and then we got, okay, this is the problem, and then we try to bring the relevant medicine to them with the right dose at the right channels. So that's how we work. So like Mr. Lars mentioned, we don't work on the assumptions. We have methods or ways to contact our users at different stages, and then make sure that they will basically utilize the program optimally. So that's about the significant improvement. Now, not only that, but also the significant improvement in terms of the strategic value is actually coming from the impact evaluations, and also from the monitoring process. In Prakerja, there is no other program that have the agility in the regulations, because regulation typically is very rigid, very fixed and stiff. But in Prakerja, in 3 years, the president decree has been remedied or adjusted twice. And then the ministerial decrees has been adjusted 4 times. And the Ministry of Finance decree has been adjusted once. So this frequency never happened in other regulations. Why Prakerja can do that? Because we have technology. And technology to capture the data. With data, then we can analyze and improve the program and bring the facts to the policymakers credibly. And then policymakers understand the reasons. Then there is a lot of debate or long debate, and then they will adjust the regulations in order to make sure that the program works optimally. And then for the first question, what are the key success or takeaways of Kartu Prakerja in the process of providing opportunities for the more disadvantaged or underprivileged users? So I need to mention to you that from 17 million participants, right now it's like 17.9 million people, the percentage of the people with disabilities in our participants is 3%. And then people with under high school education, so only elementary school and junior high school graduates, 34%. People who live in the villages, 64%. Women of female participants, 51%. So as you see that Prakerja is actually very inclusive. Not only that, all the regions and districts in Indonesia have Prakerja participants. So this is the large scale and inclusivity and speed that we bring in Indonesia. This is the first time there is a program that can do this in a large scale and this kind of speed. And then how can we bring the number of participants from different backgrounds? The most important is number one, socialization, communications. So we use different channels assessed by people, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, television, radio, and so on, to announce the program. What is it for them? Number two, after people know about the program, how to make sure they are easy to access the program. That's why we built our website, www.prakerja.go.id, using UI UX that already being tested. So before the launch, we always test whether regular people, typical users, actually can understand the instruction and can basically follow the steps. It took about 20 minutes to fulfill all the applications. And there is no need to have a face-to-face meeting. The most important, people put their email and then information on the ID card, information in the family card, and we have integration with the civil registry to make sure that, oh, this is right, this is right, this is right, this is right. And if it is not right, then it stops. And then it gives information that you need to contact the local civil registry office to fix things, or maybe there is a typo or something, then you have to correct that. And then we also do some SMS OTP, because everybody must have cell phone, because this is like the cheapest method in order to learn and get access of information. And the last part, we have face recognition integrated with the civil registry to make sure the authenticity of the participant, because government will give cash incentive at the end of the training after people complete their training. So as you see that, as long as there is money, there will be some moral hazard. In order to protect that, that's why we have layers of identification of the participants at upfront. So not only that, what is important here is that Prakerja also make sure that we have
Denni, can I request you to be short, because there may be other, yeah. Can you kindly wrap up it?
So the most important, again, make sure that everybody know. And then number two, easy access. And we use a website, no need to download the application. And we have on-demand registration. And we also have the contact center such that people can ask anything and then participate in the program. That's why the number of the take-ups in Prakerja is really high.
Thank you,
Over
Denni.
to you.
Thank you, Denni.
Yeah.
And I'm sure these are a very highlighted, and please go through the website, and I'm sure we'll get a lot of resource material. I'm sorry, because of the time, we need to be careful. So can I, yeah, so there is another question. So over to you, Maud, for the answer, please. And please keep in mind the time. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I spotted it in the chat as well. So indeed, we are using the current form of the Education Scalability Checklist also in programs that we have together with Ministries of Education for the purpose of skilling. We are doing that in 2 countries, in Uganda and Ecuador. And both of those programs also include collaboration between providers of technical and vocational education and training, public and private ones, and the private sector in the sense of employers or employers associations. And the tool can be used for that, but we do believe we will need to make some further contextualization and adaptation of some of the items to make sure that the role and the place of the private sector actors is also represented. So definitely suitable with some adaptations, and VVOB's plans on that are, we are currently going through a first phase of a first iteration of its use, and we are now collecting user feedback from different contexts and adjusting the tool. So for example, our team in Vietnam is involved in recreating a simplified version that will also make it easier on certain aspects of for users. So if you are interested in using it for skills development, please reach out, and we're happy to talk through possible adaptations for your context.
Thank you, Maud. So that was really nice of you. And I'm sure, and thank you for being so flexible and reaching out. I'm sure the participant will do that personally or through the UNESCO Secretariat. So is there any other questions? Okay, so this is the third question to Pratham. Over to you, Karthik.
Thank you. I'm just reading this for the first time. Based on the learnings of M&E, what can you recommend to other countries to implement a better monitoring system? Great. This is actually a really good system, a really good question. At the end of the day, if you saw our intervention as well, a lot of M&E practices are actually inbuilt into the intervention itself, be it assessment or be it process monitoring. Assessment is important not only from an outside point of view or someone coming externally to evaluate, but the people who are actually implementing the program, here it was volunteers, or if it is even teachers, they should actually understand the value of that assessment and how it can inform any sort of instruction. A lot of time we see a disconnect between what is being taught and what is being assessed, and both of them are not really feeding into each other, especially when it comes to basic literacy and numeracy. And hence having evaluation mechanisms which are actually owned and understood by people who are implementing the intervention is key. Process monitoring, again, this could be a different philosophy, but it cannot be a very extensive checklist. And at the end of the day, how we like to see it is that monitoring is actually mentoring. Anyone who is going into the system should be able to observe what is going on, should be able to demonstrate what is going on, and then actually provide feedback rather than just coming and filling out a process checklist, which tends to happen, especially in large-scale programs. Just coming to how this can be taken at a scale, already within India, a lot of state governments are implementing teaching at the right level with the entire school system. As Maud mentioned, a lot of these practices have actually translated into an African setting as well, where both in India and in Africa, it is a low resource setting. You cannot have a lot of technology tools, but it's important to have some basic tools so that there is tracking of this. But more importantly, everyone should understand the purpose of why they are collecting what they're collecting. I'll stop here, Purnima.
So I guess that was the last question, but as said earlier, if you have any question or anything like that, I'm sure that
English has stopped screen share.
We can reach personally or through the UNESCO Secretariat. Thank you so much for the three presenters. I think it was a great learning, especially for me personally, and I'm sure I can see like 207 people online. I'm sure we have benefited a lot. And based on our context, I'm sure we are going to replicate that based on our need. And the most important thing what I have gathered from Maud is the government having the driver's seat. That's really true in terms of scalability. This will be going only teach and test that will be doing small innovation, but still, unless it is being scaled up, I do agree very much, and I'm sure the other participants agree too. So without for much delays, thank you so much, all the three presenters once again. And here I would like to go for the closing and to the representative of Education Security Development Thailand. So over to you for the closing, please.
Thank you very much. Also, a big thanks from my side to the three speakers. This was really, really a great learning experience. You did a fantastic job in a very short period of time, demonstrating the importance of monitoring evaluation. Several things stood out for me. I guess that the overall message is I can't wait to dig even deeper into the material that you have and learn more and maybe even have follow-up conversations. I can't wait to share the recording to colleagues so that I can already know will find this interesting, as well as the countries in which I work. A couple of things stood out very clearly. Denni on Prakerja, I think the examples you gave of the importance of having information to do course corrections is really a message that came out clearly. I think you said it well when you said, I would rather get the bad news quickly and correct than go on and pretend that nothing is wrong. And your example of talking about how many times you had to go to the president's office, to the Minister of Education, and to the Minister of Finance to ask regulation to be adjusted speaks to the importance of having good M&E. I am sure this is not something you would like to do, to go and ask regulations to be adjusted. And you would only do that equipped with this, as you said, really, really strong evidence that something was not working. And to make the program even better, you wanted to make these adjustments. So fantastic examples. And I think on the summer camp there too, I'm blown away. I had to double check that that the information you shared with us was from this summer. So this is you know, fresh out of the oven, just a couple of months news, and you've spent, was it $300,000? And here you already have evidence in your hand showing what worked, where it worked. What powerful source of information now to inform other states and indeed all of us that there is something promising here to build on. And Maud, I can't wait to get my hands on your tool and play around with it and explore its possibilities. So thank you very much to the organizers for inviting all of us. I hope you, the listeners, have enjoyed it as much as I have. Thank you very much.
So thank you. I guess with this, we wrap up for the session with a 15 minutes break, and there is another session after 15 minutes break. So that is, and thank you for all your cooperation, being an active listeners. And I guess we have really learned a lot. Thank you and bye-bye.